My mom and I haven't had a healthy relationship in decades, marked by estrangement and toxic behavior. After years of silence, I reconnected with her during a family crisis, bracing for the worst. I used a surprising technique, pretending she had Alzheimer's, and it actually worked to create a surprisingly positive interaction. The salt air tasted like regret. It always did. 40 years I've breathed this air, and it's permanently laced with the weight of unspoken things, of promises broken, of a mother who somehow managed to turn affection into a weapon. I'm 40, which means I've spent a significant portion of my life actively trying to distance myself from her. 2 years of silence after my graduation. A spectacular public demolition orchestrated by Nancy. 3 years more after that. A chasm carved out by a slow, insidious drip of criticism and manipulation that nearly destroyed my marriage. My father's cancer was the lever that pried me back. A pathetic, guilt-laden pull. He refused to see me, of course. Didn't want me to witness his decline, he said, as if shielding himself from my presence would somehow alter the inevitable. So I got stuck with her. The day itself was surreal. We walked along the beach, the gray waves mirroring the overcast sky. We talked about the weather, the price of avocados, the ridiculousness of reality television, anything, to avoid the minefield of our past. I found myself almost charmed. Almost. It felt like a performance, a carefully constructed facade of normalcy that I knew, with a certainty that settled like lead in my stomach, wouldn't last. Dinner was equally bizarre. The restaurant was a place we used to frequent when I was a kid. The red vinyl booths worn smooth with time and countless meals. She ordered the Dover sole. I had the grilled salmon. We complimented the decor, the service, the bread. It was all surface. A brittle layer of politeness stretched taut over a bedrock of simmering resentment. I felt detached, watching myself from a distance, a ghost observing a scene ID played out countless times before. Then, after dessert, a shared cream brulee that tasted vaguely of ashes, she dropped it. We need to talk about what happened 3 years ago. The words hung in the air, thick and heavy, instantly shattering the fragile illusion of peace. My pulse quickened. My palms started to sweat. Here it came. The inevitable dredging up of grievances, the endless cycle of blame and justification, the familiar tightening in my chest, the instinctive urge to flee. But I didn't flee. Not this time. I'd been preparing for this in a way. A desperate, last-ditch effort to preserve what little sanity I had left. It was a technique I'd stumbled upon, a psychological trick born of desperation and years of emotional exhaustion. A shield, a defense mechanism so bizarre it felt almost ludicrous. Before the talk, I'd repeated a mantra to myself, a single, unwavering thought. If she had Alzheimer's or dementia, I wouldn't argue with her. There'd be no point, no logic in trying to reason with a mind unraveling, no benefit in defending myself against accusations born of confusion and disorientation. So, I decided to apply the same logic to Nancy. She's sick, I told myself. It's her illness talking. There is zero point in explaining myself, in justifying anything. It's a sickness, a distortion, and you don't argue with a sickness. You manage it. You navigate around it. You survive it. I looked at her, at the familiar, sharp angles of her face, the perpetually pursed lips, the eyes that could dissect a person with a single glance. I saw not my mother but a patient, a woman afflicted with an illness I couldn't diagnose, couldn't cure, but could, perhaps, endure. "All right," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Let's talk." The beef bourguignon tasted like ash in my mouth. I pushed a forkful around my plate, avoiding her gaze. Shed started, predictably, with a comment about my wedding. Something about the seating chart, how my Aunt Carol hadn't been close enough to the head table to properly hear the speeches. It was a minor detail, insignificant even then, but Nancy dredged it up with the practiced ease of someone reciting a well-worn monologue. I just thought it was. "Unkind, Ethan," Shed said, her voice laced with that particular brand of disappointed accusation only she could deliver. "Carol has always been so supportive of you." I felt the familiar tightening in my chest, the instinctive urge to lash out, to dismantle her argument, to prove her wrong. Years of arguing with her had honed that skill. I could dissect her logic, expose the hypocrisy, the subtle digs hidden within seemingly innocent observations. I wanted to, but Dad was in the next room, frail and confused, relying on us. And Nancy was undeniably a sick woman. The Alzheimer's, the doctor had said, was likely early onset. It didn't excuse the behavior, but it complicated things. It added a layer of detachment, a clinical distance I hadn't possessed before. That's when it clicked. The Alzheimer technique, a shield forged in the crucible of countless arguments, a fragile hope for survival. "I'm not going back to the past," I said, the words feeling strangely hollow. "What happened happened. Let's focus on the present and on supporting Dad with his recovery." She didn't accept that, not even for a second. It was like throwing a pebble into a lake, expecting to stop the ripples. "Oh, Ethan, you're so dismissive," she said, her smile sharp, brittle, always deflecting. "It's like you think you can just erase history." Then the barbs started flying, a relentless volley of grievances resurrected from the dusty archives of my childhood. "Your wife is cold and heartless. She didn't even offer me coffee when I was at your house." It was a lie, of course. She'd offered her tea. ID noticed, but arguing the facts was pointless. "You sat me at the worst table at your wedding." Another fabrication, born from a desire to inflict discomfort. Each accusation was a tiny pinprick, designed to slowly deflate my composure. I felt the sweat start to bead on my forehead. My knuckles clenched around my water glass. The urge to fight back, to unleash a torrent of my own carefully curated insults, was overwhelming. It would be satisfying, a brief, fleeting victory, but it wouldn't solve anything. It would only fuel the cycle. I focused on my breathing, on the imagined stillness of the lake, desperately trying to quell the rising tide of anger. Alzheimer technique. Alzheimer technique. I repeated it like a mantra. It wasn't about winning. It was about survival. It was about minimizing the damage. 10 minutes. It felt like an eternity. The dining room seemed to shrink, the air thickening with unspoken resentment. Every part of me wanted to fire back, to tell her exactly what I thought of her manipulative tactics, to finally put her in her place. But then I'd see Dad's face, pale and vulnerable, and I'd remember the doctor's words, the uncertainty surrounding her diagnosis. "No point. She's very ill." And then, just as abruptly as it had begun, it stopped. She paused mid-sentence, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes, a blankness, a disconnection. Then, completely randomly, she changed the subject. "Did you see that piece on the news about the penguins?" she asked, her voice devoid of any lingering animosity. Apparently, they're teaching them to recycle plastic. I couldn't believe it. It was like a 10-minute narc episode and then, done. The tension in the room dissipated, leaving a strange, hollow silence. I stared at her, bewildered. Had it worked? Or was this just another one of her unpredictable shifts, a prelude to a fresh wave of accusations? I had no idea. All I knew was that the beef bourguignon still tasted like ash. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. I picked at my food, the rich sauce suddenly repulsive. Had it worked? Or was this just another one of her unpredictable shifts, a prelude to a fresh wave of accusations? I braced myself, stealing the mental wall I'd painstakingly constructed. About 20 minutes later, she tried again. The subject wasn't the wedding, though that felt like a reprieve, but something older. Something ID actively tried to bury. Something about a childhood birthday party, a forgotten gift, and a perceived slight that, even now, felt like a fresh wound. My defenses were low, the initial surge of adrenaline from maintaining the boundary already fading. She stepped up her game, her voice laced with a mournful quality designed to elicit guilt. But I held the line. The words felt foreign on my tongue, a mantra against the storm raging within me. I'm not discussing things from the past. I repeated the phrase flat and toneless. No emotion, just a statement of fact. She paused. A real pause, not the dramatic, manipulative kind. The air in the room seemed to shimmer, the silence punctuated only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Then a complete shift. Her shoulders relaxed, the pinched expression around her mouth smoothed out. She looked almost bewildered. "Thanks so much for coming," she said, her voice softer than I'd heard it all evening. "I'm so happy you're back." The words felt rehearsed, a script hastily adopted. But the lack of the usual undercurrent of accusation, the absence of the familiar sting, it was startling. I didn't respond. I didn't offer a reciprocal expression of gratitude. I simply met her gaze, maintaining the detached neutrality. The strategy, the ridiculous, almost cruel strategy ID invented, seemed to be working. I called my wife that night. The house was quiet, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator. I needed to talk, to dissect the experience, to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. That meeting was transformational, I told her, the words sounding almost absurd even to my own ears. For the first time in my life, I walked away from a conversation with my mom without being completely nerve-wracked. I felt liberated. I felt empowered. I felt like I'd stopped being a victim, like I'd actually chosen to stop being one. It was a ridiculous, almost childish sentiment, but it was true. The feeling of agency, of control, was intoxicating. It was a stark contrast to the years spent navigating her emotional minefield, constantly anticipating her next verbal attack. I'd always been reactive, a defensive player. Now, for the first time, I felt like I was directing the game. I've started calling it the Alzheimer technique. It's not that I think she has Alzheimer's, not officially. It's a mental shortcut, a way to compartmentalize, to block out the decades of manipulation and gaslighting. Treat her like a person with dementia. Don't argue. Don't justify. Don't explain. Just hold my line and repeat it. Eventually, they'll exhaust themselves. It's a brutal tactic, I know. It feels almost dishonest. But what's more dishonest than allowing myself to be systematically eroded by someone else's unresolved issues? The fear still lingers, of course. The fear that she'll see through the charade, that she'll find a way to dismantle my defenses. The fear that this is just a temporary reprieve, a brief lull before the next storm. But tonight, for the first time in a very long time, I slept soundly. I felt, if not at peace, then at least armed. And that, I realized, was a victory in itself.
Hello, I'm Dr. Julian Reed. Thank you for sharing this incredibly difficult and painful story. It takes immense courage to articulate experiences like these, and I want to acknowledge the profound impact this relationship has had on your life. What you've described is a deeply unsettling and emotionally damaging dynamic, and it's understandable that you've spent so much of your life trying to create distance from it. The weight of those 40 years, the regret you taste in the salt air, that's a powerful image. It speaks to a pervasive sense of loss, not just of what could have been, but of the childhood you deserved. The way your mother has consistently weaponized affection, using it to control and manipulate, is a hallmark of a very specific and harmful kind of relational abuse. You're absolutely right to identify this as gaslighting. She's systematically undermining your reality and making you question your own perceptions. The spectacular public demolition after your graduation, the insidious criticism impacting your marriage, these aren't isolated incidents. They are patterns of behavior designed to maintain power and control. It's completely natural that you feel guilt-laden about the pullback after your father's cancer diagnosis. You're being manipulated into a position where you feel responsible for your mother's emotional well-being, even though she's actively harming you. It's not your responsibility to manage her emotional state, particularly when it comes at the expense of your own. Refusing to see you, despite his purported desire to shield himself, is another layer of this complex dynamic, a way to control and inflict guilt. The description of the dinner is particularly poignant. The forced normalcy, the brittle politeness, the sense of detachment, it's a vivid depiction of the emotional labor you've been performing for decades. It's incredibly draining to constantly monitor yourself, to walk on eggshells, to suppress your genuine feelings in order to avoid triggering her. And the feeling of watching yourself from a distance, a ghost observing a scene, is a common experience for those in abusive relationships. It's a coping mechanism to create emotional distance from the pain. Your Alzheimer's technique is remarkably insightful and resourceful, born of genuine desperation. It's not a sign of weakness, but a testament to your intelligence and resilience. It's a brilliant, if heartbreaking, way to try and navigate an unnavigable situation, recognizing that arguing with someone experiencing cognitive decline is futile, and then applying that same logic to your mother. It's a testament to your ability to problem solve, even under immense emotional pressure. It's a form of self-preservation. Framing her behaviors as symptoms of an illness allows you to create a buffer, to lessen the personal sting of her accusations. You've essentially created a strategy to protect your own mental and emotional health in a relationship that consistently threatens it. It's a sign of your strength that you've been able to do that. What's crucial now is recognizing that this technique, while helpful in the moment, is a coping mechanism, and coping mechanisms, while necessary for survival, aren't long-term solutions. It's important to explore the deeper wounds and the underlying beliefs that have allowed this dynamic to persist for so long. I want to emphasize that you are not responsible for your mother's behavior. Her actions are a reflection of her issues, not of your worth or your actions. It's vital that you continue to prioritize your own well-being and to establish and enforce healthy boundaries, even if those boundaries are met with resistance or manipulation. We can work together to unpack these experiences, process the trauma, and develop strategies to move forward in a way that protects your mental and emotional health.